what do you make of, ultimately, the amount of people viewing this in an unedited form? How is the media landscape changing?
Yeah, and again, I think you put it well. It's like airing different types of content. And I just saw your last clip too. The head of partnerships at X has been going on a listening tour. Well, I guess I was going on a listening tour last night too. Like, for one, I had kind of a hard time finding the interview on X, Twitter. I'm not sure it was really a story about that platform, though I do, think that there is value in, kind of discussing that Musk made a commitment to at least platforming this video. But I also found it on YouTube as well. So I don't know. I think there's some other forces going on here too, because it definitely was like unusual content, right? Like, this is not something you normatively see here in American discourse. So I think there's a lot of factors. I think it speaks to the nature of the internet. It's a complicated space, though it has these norms, right? But something different kind of pierced through over here, and it may also involve older technology too, like the .coms, the websites.
Right.
Tucker Carlson's website seemed to play an important role in that. So, and we don't really have any insight into really how many people viewed this, because there aren't analytics on things like older platforms like that, a website.
And to that end, I think you were referencing in the break that you can see how many people have viewed a pinned post, but ultimately, how do we know how many minutes of that has ultimately been consumed, and we therefore are left to perhaps, ingesting memes and smaller parts of it? How does that make us yet more siloed rather than looking more broadly?
Yeah, well, I would say the norms, at least in the West, and the discourse coming from the East, is we're getting it through memes. We're getting it through news stories in our press. The difference here was that it was, as you were saying, it was just kind of uninterrupted. It was unfettered information coming through in a 2-hour block. So for me, again, that was what felt like something that was different, and maybe discussing a bit. The discourse had changed, so we'll see what the market thinks of this.
For me, it's worth discussing both the science and the art behind video content on social media platforms, right? So that was a pretty long interview. And, we on this show, Caroline and I, we post clips of interesting conversations on X, on Reels, and on YouTube. Sometimes we might do a longer form on YouTube. But as I understand it, the basic science is that the attention span of the viewer is limited to that much shorter bite, or they seek out something very long. What did you learn about duration video on the X platform from what happened last night?
Well, I think some people were bored and tuned out, kind of with the history in the beginning. 2 hours is a long clip. But just the fact that a 2-hour clip was available, and that there may have been an attention audience behind it, given, what Carlson brings to this. So for me, it was really understanding how this was, I'm trying to make sense of it, honestly, but it's almost like a new media formula that's rooted in the internet. So it was like Musk provided a platform which acts a little bit like the broadcast, and gets it, out to people. And then Carlson had the access, but also his own audience. He delivered attention to this topic, and also access to a source.
Yes.
And Putin was the source, right? So, but really for me, what was interesting was that, at least in the United States, you don't really have access, freedom of information to stuff like that. 2 hours of Putin. So again, call it what you want, propaganda. It's obviously meant to influence, but we don't usually have that type of access into information coming directly to Americans. But I think it also went out to other people in the world too. I don't think it was just us as an audience, but I do think that, again, you're seeing discourse on Twitter, X today, people who feel kind of safe in giving their reaction to that interview. But I think a lot of people aren't having a conversation maybe about what was said, even having, discourse, with others publicly, especially. You won't see that kind of stuff on social media. Maybe you're at a coffee shop or on a kitchen table, but it feels like there's a silent audience, and I don't really, know how big it is, but I do think people listened last night.